seen my bio at all, you'll know I'm thrilled to be anywhere. But this is great to be in an arena where people are experts at caring for someone else and making a difference in the lives of companies where people are employed to support families and build society, because that's what you do. Very often I speak to business owners and entrepreneurs, and they do talk about taking risks and being brave and that sort of thing. And I was really pleased this morning to hear Jonathan say that EAs are risk averse. I'm here to tell you that's a good thing. There is nothing wrong with being risk averse. Plenty wrong with being cowardly. You don't get anywhere without being brave. But you don't have to be reckless. And some of you are working for bosses that may be a little reckless and may make you feel a little nervous about the things that they do, and they may make it difficult for you to follow their instructions when it needs to be important that you understand the legislation. Because it's not always him that can get in trouble. It can be, well, I didn't know what she was doing. Now, it sounds from what I've heard is that most of you have got great bosses that you work for, great executives, and that's really important, especially at a high level of what you do. But we all know that even at the highest levels, things can be done in ways that have less than full integrity. Now, what I would like to do today is share the keys from my story that are relevant to the topic that we have, which is being able to handle criticism. I've handled probably more than my fair share of criticism. When you've been to prison, it's not something you go around advertise, well actually I do. But it's something that generally is a shameful thing. You're not proud of it, and people do feel the right to criticise you for it, and guess what? They're right. So I've had some experience with being criticised not only for my blunder, but also being labelled as tainted, criminal, unemployable, and having to overcome that and decide, what am I going to do with those criticisms? How do I respond? I know how you feel, and I'm going to show you why I know how you feel. When someone criticises you, either justly or unjustly, I know what that does physically to our body. You know, some of the best seminars that I've been to have been presented by people who started off not being good at what they did, like Terry. She had authenticity all the way through her talk. But if someone presents a seminar to me about goal setting, and they say, I've been goal setting since I was 3 years old, and there's never been a year I haven't got what I wanted, blah, blah, blah. Well, bully for him. I would rather hear from someone who says, I was a mess at it, I was terrible, and this is how I overcame that, and this is what helped me. So is it okay if I'm not sort of professional and slick? Is it okay? Good. Right, so my picture is of treasures in a dark place. Because in every adversity there's treasure to be found, and in the adversity of criticism, which can cut so deeply, and then we can add to it by beating ourselves up over it. If we look at it differently, there is still treasure to be found. Now, just so you don't sit here wondering, how did she get in there? What happened with the prison thing? I'll give you a quick précis of that because I want to cover what we've got, but I also don't want to leave you hanging. Is that fair enough? Okay. My husband and I were very successful with investing. I've been in business for a long time, or in sales. Business is sales, but either working for someone else or in my own. We were investing, I invested with a fellow, mostly property, should have stuck to what I knew. Invested with a fellow who was a currency trader. He did actually create a proper managed fund that was registered by the ASIC, and I was a referrer for him, what you might call an authorised representative. Problem is, he was stealing everyone's money and giving us, and my own as well, and giving us a little bit back each month, which we thought was our return, but it was in fact what's called a Ponzi scheme, and it was our own money. After a year and a half of that happening, he ran out of money and stopped paying and blamed it on the market, and he picked a month that had dipped. And so my job was to explain to everybody I was his buffer, much like you guys are. You feel that? You feel sometimes you can feel like you are caught between a rock and a hard place. You know, kicked from up there, kicked from down there, and you're the one who has to be the diplomat, and you don't get any glory for it. So it was my job to tell everyone we're not getting paid. And that was hard, but I did it, because that's what he was telling me. I was working for him, that's what he said to say. Second month, people started to panic and get aggressive and demand their money back, and they got it. They got their money back, the ones who did. Third month came along, no more payment. By that time, I was a wreck, with people demanding me. I wasn't trained. It was just, I had my own money in, 6 figures, 104,000 of my own. And other people had their money through me. And you know what? Emails, phone calls, not so much abusing me, but demanding, you don't understand, I need this, I really need this. And I caved under pressure. I still had money coming in. People were still knowing he wasn't paying, didn't want to miss out, put their money in. And I asked him, could we, just this once? I have a whole talk on just this once. There are ladies who are pregnant because of just this once. There are bouncers sitting in jail because just this once they bopped someone outside a nightclub and the person actually died from just this once. Just this once has huge consequences, and it's a great talk for young adults and teens and university students, especially in business. Because often when they're doing a business course or something like that, they go into a firm and someone in the firm says, son, I don't care what they told you at uni, this is how we do it. And they have to have the strength to not be intimidated and decide, do I want to work for this company? What do I do with this? They will come to someone like you as the EA if they feel you are approachable, perhaps, for guidance. Maybe they will. And maybe they'll keep quiet and just leave, and at their exit interview, they might not even tell you. But very often the things that you find at exit interviews are things that you could have fixed up. Now the money that you invest as a company in hiring people, and then they say that they're leaving and you're thinking, why are you leaving? And they tell you something about the person that is supervising them. But you've lost this staff member, it's too late now, you couldn't do anything about it. Or maybe they were being bullied and were too frightened to actually say something. And you still got all the posters up, we don't tolerate bullying here. Yeah. So that's why it's important in your role and in the managers that you have that a culture of openness and integrity so that people have a safe place to go. I had no safe place to go. The people that I would have gone to for advice had their money in. So, as it turned out, I said to this fellow, do you think, just this once, I can use this little bit of money to make a temporary payment to everyone until things get back on track? I didn't steal it, but I redirected it, even with his permission. Had I physically given it to him and he gave it, that wouldn't have been a problem. But I did that, knowing it was wrong, not knowing quite how wrong it was, but still. And that's what I did. And then when things went badly, I was called into the ASIC to talk about the fellow, and I said, this is what's happened, this is what I did to try and fix it, what do we do now? Because I could have replaced it myself. Wasn't allowed to. Was put into voluntary liquidation where our half a dozen houses and everything was sold up, our money was frozen and confiscated, and the liquidators spent it on their fees. And then when we'd run out of money, and then I went to work for a corporate investigator to find out about fraud, because I thought I would become an expert on fraud warning signals, and I did do that, and I even wrote a book. But while I worked for him, I was served with papers charging me, and then in 2009 I went to court to receive my penalty because I was guilty, and I got 8 months in prison. And that's my story. I can tell you a little bit about that, but what I'd like to do, if it's all right with you, is to keep it within the context of what I'm here to speak on. So one criticism that may arise that I'll have to respond to is, I wish you talked more about this or this. But what I can do is, and what I do with different companies, is I'll go in and I'll talk about various different aspects, including the prison part, because that's what hooks people and makes them listen to the rest of what I say. Well, it is. It's, you know, if I talk to them about bullying, I can give examples. If I talk to them about how to deal with difficult people, I can give examples and then relate it to the workplace. And that way, when you add that emotional drama to the head knowledge, it's going to have a more lasting impact. So feel free to contact me later on about anything that I might be able to help you out with your company to help that cohesion and that workplace, and minimise your staff turnover, because that's really, really important because it's so costly, isn't it? Yeah, it sure is. So, sometimes it can feel, can I just give you some feedback? Sure. And it feels like this. Anyone had that experience? Yeah. So we're going to talk about positive feedback, negative feedback, and being able to assert yourself. Not always easy. And there are 3 areas. There's a whole lot that we can go into. I can send you some more information, but it can be summarised in 3 areas for dealing with this stuff. And when this happens, you've received a criticism, and that's how you feel. And of course, there's a truck coming. Wow! That's how I felt, but a little less funny. The 3 areas that summarise how you respond to criticism are considering and getting to know your internal juvenile, okay? That young person inside us that feels insecure, unable to do the job. You know, we have those fears inside us, they're like, am I up to it? And sort of fears that the criticism has validity even when it doesn't. And then we either feel aggressive and defensive, or we feel so deeply hurt and humiliated we feel like we can't show up to work again. And we go home and we cry. Done that. I've done that. I've had a manager, I was a young girl, early 20s, manager was so nasty in her, the way that she spoke to me. One manager had told me I was the full-timer, therefore I was in charge of the shop. So I was telling the girls, this was at a theme park, and so I was telling the girls, okay, it's time for you to go to lunch now, and you know, you're doing a really good job. And they went to the other managers and said, who does she think she is? She's turned up and she's acting like she's in charge. And I had been told I was. But the other managers said, what are you doing? I said, well, this is what I was told. I said, no, you won't. That's not right. You're not more important than anyone. You're not doing anything more than anyone. And I was made to feel this big. And it might not seem nasty in the retelling, but at the time, I felt like I'd been run over and trampled. My beautiful dream job, I just wanted to get away. But I needed the work. It's all very well to say I'll get another job. Well, that's not realistic. Because you know what? You need to work. It's important. And those feelings, I didn't know how to deal with them then. I just had to front up and get used to it all. What I did do is I went in and I apologised to those girls. And I said, this is what I was told, so I'm really sorry. And they were quite forgiving. Now there's something powerful about an apology. You will get criticisms that are valid sometimes. You'll get criticisms that are positive. Let me just give you, we don't really need to go too much into positive criticism because normally we like that, don't we? We like positive feedback. But listen, ladies, and we got the gentleman in here. Is he doing something technical? There you are, good. What do we often do if someone gives us a compliment? Do we, look, if If someone gives you a compliment on your nostrils, what would be a typical way an immature young person might answer that? Okay, I'll tell you how I did as an insecure young person. Normally what you would do is go, oh, this old thing. Oh, did you say that? There you go. So we did have someone. You can say, oh, this old thing. Sometimes, if we get a compliment at work, I'll say, you did a really good job on that. And we'll say, oh, it was nothing. Or, oh no, it was the team, I couldn't have done it without the team. Now that's nice to say, but what you must preface that with and be assertive with, in the face of even positive criticism, you stand tall, relaxed, and you say, thank you. Now after you say thank you, you might say, I really enjoyed it. Thank you. I'm really pleased to have done a project that exercised my leadership skills. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to the next one. Thank you. Can we talk about the next project? Because I'd really like to show you what I can do. See the difference? Instead of downplaying ourselves, thank you. I was working with a really fantastic team and they brought out the best in me, and I believe I did in them too. Giving credit where credit's due. That's how you accept a compliment. You be gracious. You don't fiddle. You don't touch your face. You don't go, oh, thanks, and you don't get a crush on the person who gave it to you. You say thank you. This is where I went to live for 8 months. Now, in a place like this, you might be thinking, well, how does this relate to corporate life? I'll tell you how it relates to corporate life. When someone has had trauma, they are emotionally arrested, and unless they learn to get over it, quite often they'll be stunted at that age. And the behaviour that I came across, and also behaviour under pressure and under stress, is often less mature than what you would demonstrate when you have all your faculties and you're calm and you're happy and things are going well. Would you agree? It felt like I was living back in year 9 with a bunch of the cliquey, nasty girls from that school. Rough ones. Now you can dress them up and put a bit of lippy on them, but they still turn up at your workplace. Yeah? And in your workplace culture, and I'm not just going to, I'm talking about girls because most of us here are women, and very often in the corporate world there's a large feminine, and boys can be like this too. But generally speaking, that backstabby and that competitiveness and that nastiness, you have influence over that. So that of the 3 areas, the first area is understanding your own reaction and where it comes from, and choosing, okay, I'm not going to give in to the little girl inside me, getting healed of that. Second reaction is how you respond and see that other person. Because very often, they don't know that they're being nasty or jealous or picky. Now sometimes they do and they're really calculating about it. And if you happen to have said something to them, you'll keep. You don't hear it, but you feel it. Ever felt like that? Yeah? I learned a key in prison. And it was to see them through different eyes. No matter how nasty, no matter how cranky, to see them differently and actually care. Even the ones that gave me a hard time. Let me tell you a story. I was known as a 180 straightie. I come from, to make matters even more embarrassing, pastor's kid. Yeah, people laughing, And some of you are thinking, well, that explains it. So I come from a conservative, fairly moral, kind of nice background where people are nice to one another most of the time. And so I was quite naive, and being like that actually, it's not so much that it made me a target for bullying, although that can happen, but it can be a target for someone to benefit from your niceness. And this girl, this woman, she was 6 foot, very strongly built, quite androgynous, bipolar, schizophrenic, drug addict. I found out later she was in for putting a hammer through her partner's head. Glad I found it out later. She comes up to me and she says, "So you've had a visit from your folks?" I'm like, yeah. "Can they bring me something?" Pastor's kid, I'm thinking, a book? I said, maybe they can donate a book to the library and you could get it. What do you need? I'll ask them. No, some drugs. Now you might think that sounds funny now. It's really not funny at the time, because that's what these guys do. When the sniffer dogs and the officers are searching people, I get a cursory glance, or my family get a cursory glance. But there are some families, they just, I know it's prejudice, no, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but quite often when you do, they look like that. They look like they might be hiding something, so they find someone like me. Now, so she's saying, she's trying to intimidate me. And you only have a split second to answer and come up with something really clever, I didn't come up with anything clever, but I had an attitude of caring. I had an attitude already of feeling sorry for and wanting to help, because I'm a rescuer. That's how I got in trouble in the first place. I rescue. So I had to put boundaries in place. So she's looking down at me like this. I'm looking up at her. And when it finally dawned on me, because I'm a little slow, I would not make a good EA because I don't tweak to things. I have got one that a lady, she's not full-time, but she helps me, and I bless her heart, and I've learned a lot about how I can be a better person for her to help today. Thank you very much. So she's going to be really happy that I came here. So she said, "Can they bring me some drugs?" And just like that, there is no way in the world, and you know that moment where you don't quite know what's coming next, but you realise you've made a blue? But then it came to me, because it was my instinct, because I'm Australian, there is no way in the world I would risk getting you into trouble. Now, you can't plan that, I could offer to send you a sheet out with some witty returns, and that wouldn't be on it. And she said, "You're worried about me?" I said, Yep. And I thought, this is working. Yep, there's not a chance. No way, not a chance. I said, "I care about you too much." Do you know, that woman, who was what you might call an alpha female, she became my friend and very protective of me. I didn't get bothered by anybody after that. When you care about the person that you think is your enemy, the person who's criticising, giving you a hard time, maybe that's an opportunity for you to serve them and care about them. Often people criticise out of jealousy, though sometimes their criticism isn't valid, and you've got to decide. First thing you do to be assertive is you pause. Always pause before you speak. Always. Because there were times when I did open my mouth and it really wasn't smart. Pause and consider. And even as you start to feel the heartbeat and the emotions, speak slowly. If someone is yelling at you, and I would have that, because often people are, they have mental illness, or the fact that they're volatile, often it's what got them into trouble, and then they get into the wrong crowd where volatility is rewarded with more volatility and violence and so on. If someone is yelling, which I know it's inappropriate and it doesn't happen anymore, but if they do, you make your voice softer. You don't, what happens with children. When one starts yelling, then the next one answers back and yells back, and then what happens? Gets louder, and then louder, and nobody's listening. When someone is getting out of control, might be a client, might be someone insisting on seeing your boss. Has to see me now. Calm. Speak very softly. Don't conflict. Get alongside. Sympathise with. So, and if you have to say no, that's when we come into the third area that will help you with handling criticisms. And that is boundaries. Boundaries. Why boundaries? When you know your scope, your responsibilities, what you have been asked to deliver and what you have not, then when someone says you should have done this, you can say, well, I can see, instead of, don't argue, you say, I can see why that would have been a really helpful thing. However, this is the scope that I've been asked to address, and that wasn't included this time. See how it's not having an aggressive conflict, it's just having boundaries. If I had had boundaries in place, I would not have compromised and broken the law. But I needed to fix the problem. It wasn't my problem to fix. What are you fixing that is not your responsibility in your workplace? Who is making you feel guilty because they haven't been trained properly to do their job? And who's worried about losing their job, so you might cover up for them a little bit, or just do this little bit for them because they're falling behind? I'm not saying don't be helpful. I'm saying remember your boundaries and don't get caught up in emotional blackmail to do things that are outside your scope. And when people criticise you, you're not coming back and criticising them, you're pointing out the third party, which is the boundaries. I would really like to help, however, I don't have the room in my calendar right now. Let me put you on to Fred. You don't have to be a yes person to be a good EA. And I don't mean just your boss, and it could be your boss needing you to do more than what's expected. Now maybe where you can rearrange things and spread them out a bit more so that you're not overwhelmed. Stress is the #1 mental illness, and depression. Stress and depression, because often they interchange. Why? People are doing too much. Their boundaries are soft. Oh, I have to do this. Well, really? Define your scope. Define what you do. What's important, what isn't. Now, sometimes there'll be times when you've just got to scurry and get everybody on board and do that, and that's your skill. But your boundaries in yourself will help you deflect a lot of unnecessary painful stuff without hurting the person's feelings. Does that help? Does that make sense? Being able to say no. It's very important to be able to say no, especially to someone who has put a hammer through her partner's head. Very important. That could have ended rather badly. Glad it didn't. Now, what I do have is a sheet that I can email you with a number of responses that you can keep on hand and just get used to saying until they come naturally. Would that be helpful? That would be helpful. Let me just give you a few examples, because I could do like a whole series of workshops on this. Things like, well, we've done some positive ones about saying, thank you, I love working in my strengths. We did that. How to respond to negative criticism. Does the criticism have merit? Does it have merit? Let me just tell you a quick little story, because whatever you speak on, you get tested on. And on Monday night, I had an online experience. Someone had been very volatile about something that I was involved in, and I was a bit fed up, and I had sent him a reply thinking that I was being assertive, practicing for this seminar. I know, I'm just going to say this to him. And I won't go into details, but few minutes, and he's in London. And I've only met him like on LinkedIn. He's just someone who linked in with me. And he had an opinion about a certain thing. Now obviously he's got some history. And he shot back and abused the heck out of me, saying that, that I was being passive aggressive, and which it was actually, but you know, really, really volatile. And it hurt, and because it had come into my computer, into my office, in my house. That's why it hurts, because it reaches right into your personal space. I don't know this man, and yet these words hurt me. I went to my room, and I know you feel these feelings sometimes. My heart was thumping, my face was hot, I felt tremors down my legs. You ever had that feeling? Yeah? You feel awful. And I became conscious of what I was feeling. I thought, I'm feeling this. What's going on with this? I took some deep breaths, and I had a little bit of a pity party. And I thought, what can I do about this? Well, let me look at this through his eyes. And I looked at my email again. Oh, it was a LinkedIn message. And I thought, I can see he's wrong. I was right. But I wasn't in the right. And sometimes, and I don't know whether this is in all the U-Butte management guidebooks, sometimes it's better to be kind than to be right. Do you need to win every time? Do you? What if he's an idiot and he's just like those people in prison? If I challenged everyone who challenged me in prison, I might not have come out. I could have chosen to be kind. So you know what I did? I did something that strategy-wise might not seem like a great thing to do in your workplace, because some people might take advantage of it. But this is what I did. I sent a full and frank, without excuse, apology. And I said, I apologise. I am so sorry. You were right. I should not have written what I had. I interpreted your earlier email. I misinterpreted your earlier email, and that was wrong. I didn't say, but what you've got to understand is, I've been to prison and I've been really hurt, and you need to know that I'm not normally like this. I'm a nice person. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Do you know that volatile man, and also previously he had said, and don't bother replying again. And he unlinked me. I was unlinked. I thought it was only those people that get unlinked. Stalkers and things. I felt awful, but I sent that apology. Within 3 minutes, the loveliest reply came back. Never underestimate the power of humility and genuine care about the other person. Because every person who is dysfunctional, or just you think they are, they just want to be heard and cared about. So even when they're criticising you, you can look at that and think, is there merit? And how can I save this? What can I do? Sometimes you can't do anything because, you know, it's pretty big stuff up. And then it's everybody's problem. And they've all got to fix it up. But you're too valuable an employee to be sacked over one mistake. I'm sorry, I was wrong. The buck stops here. Radical. Sometimes there will be a manager who will go, well, and and I've had that happen too. But most of the time, people are surprised because people don't do it. They make excuses. Yeah, I shouldn't have done that, but you shouldn't have. You made me. Does that help? The whole attitude thing, that whole, when you think about the other person, that it empowers you. And you know what? I was on top again. I had a clear conscience, because here's the thing, when you've apologised, that's the end of it. You do not keep belting yourself up, because what can you do? That's the end of it. just as when someone apologises to you, you must have the grace to let them have a fresh start. You might not give them the same responsibilities. You might need to re-educate, retrain, help them, but you don't treat them any less moving on. Okay? All right. Well, what I would like to show you is that was me on my first day home. Looks a little different. But you know, from that going forward, I had to deal with what am I going to do now? And I had to get well. And people were great, and I was a bit prickly. And I had to filter my criticisms. Another one of the things that you can say is, if someone wants to criticise you, is, look, before you do, I just need to let you know, I have specific mentors that help me with this. And just for now, I've got to listen to them undistracted, but I do appreciate that you care enough to offer your criticism. If you don't want to hear it at all, that's how you can shut it down. You can also say, thank you for your feedback. I really appreciate that you care enough about me to offer that critique. I don't even like to use the word like criticism. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your feedback. I really appreciate it, and I'll take that on board. Take it on board, and I'll go. Thank you for your feedback. You're an idiot. Thank you for your feedback. I really appreciate that you care enough to do that. Even when they're being a bit catty, I really appreciate that you took, that you're being really nice about it, even if they're not. Try not to put sarcasm in the tone. You got to try and be genuine about that. You do. Whoops, what did I do there? Yeah. So I came out with this, and that was my first book, and people said I shouldn't do it. But this book empowers women to spot fraud in finance and romance. So that's what I do. And what I would like to hear from, well, I'll get to that. I'm going to wind it up. Front page, local paper. Do you think I might get criticised for that? Would you be surprised that the business community of my town supported me because I stepped out and I was brave and I was vulnerable and I was trying to help people? Pretty embarrassing. That was in every Sunday paper. Terry talked about publicity. Every Sunday paper in the country ran that story. Half a page. Because I'd rather be famous for doing something wonderful and nice and noble, but that's what I've got. Second book. This is my letters and private journal entries while I was in prison. It's not a business book. It is what I went through as I was writing while I was going, and that's outside. And by making good decisions and listening to the right criticism and resisting the wrong criticism, you can go further, and even no matter how bad your mistake is, you can turn it into something great. And that's what I did. This is lunch with Chief Justice Paul Jersey. And he is the top judge in the country, in Queensland, and he's my sentencing judge's boss. And I had lunch with him. It felt really, really good. Oh, I hope that gets back. Oh, I really hope that gets back. Anyway, so now I do things like the Office Professionals Conference. That was a year ago. I think some of you might have been there. Then I went to America. This is where being able to take your stuff up, not beat yourself up, turn it into something else, no matter what the critics say, you be brave. This is just me bragging now. I just want to show this off. Here. And this is where you give back. People can criticise you, but when you know what you're about and you know your purpose in your company and in your life, when you know what you're about, you start giving back and making a difference. And I was able to talk to the girls who were teenage girls who were locked up in Tampa, in that detention centre. So I really want to thank you for having me. What I do now, whatever I have is about giving back, because Woolies won't hire me to stack shelves anymore. Can I just get someone to tell me something they got out of it today? Something that you got out of it. Wait, let me say it again. Can I just get someone? Yeah, that's right. That criticism could have shut me down, but I chose who I was going to listen to. And you can do the very same thing with your careers. Has that been helpful? Great. And if you give me your email address and your card, I'll send you the rest of those prepared lines and some few other tips for you for that awkwardness in the workplace. So there you go. Would you like to have that? Thank you. I'm Trish Jenkins. Lead smart and live free. That's what I do.